We grow up believing that life has a rhythm, that success has a sequence, and that there will come a day when everything aligns perfectly. When the stars are in order, the timing is right, and we finally feel ready. It's a comforting thought, isn't it? The idea that there will be a moment where everything makes sense, where we'll know exactly what to do. But that belief, as soothing as it sounds, is one of the greatest illusions we hold on to. Because the truth is, the right time rarely announces itself. It doesn't arrive with a sign, it's something we create, not something we wait for. People often say, I'll start when things settle down, or I'll begin when I have more time. But things rarely settle down, and time never really slows for anyone. Life doesn't pause so you can catch up. If anything, it gets louder, busier, and more unpredictable. The belief that tomorrow will be easier than today keeps us standing still while opportunities quietly slip by. Waiting becomes a habit disguised as preparation. We tend to associate readiness with control. We think we'll act once we've minimized risk, or once we've collected enough information to guarantee success. But control is another illusion. The world moves in ways we can't predict, and waiting for certainty is like waiting for the ocean to stop moving before you learn to swim. The conditions we dream of, perfect timing, perfect circumstances, exist only in our imagination. Think of every great story of innovation, of leadership, of change. None of them began with someone saying, everything's perfect, now let's begin. They began with someone saying, I don't know if this will work, but I'll try anyway. At the right time? Wasn't waiting for them. They carved it out through action. The courage to begin before feeling ready is what separates those who talk about change from those who make it. It's not that waiting is always bad, patience has its place. But patience without purpose becomes paralysis. We convince ourselves that we're being strategic, that we're avoiding mistakes, when in truth we're avoiding discomfort. Because beginning means facing uncertainty, and uncertainty is uncomfortable. But it's also where growth lives, in that messy, unpredictable space between doubt and decision. There's something powerful about the moment you stop asking, is this the right time, and start asking, what can I do with the time I have? That shift changes everything. It turns hesitation into momentum. It transforms fear into focus. Suddenly, the calendar doesn't decide when you act, you do. Every creator, every entrepreneur, every leader who has built something meaningful has faced moments when logic said, wait. But instinct whispered, go. And it's in listening to that whisper, in trusting that imperfect action is better than perfect hesitation, that they discovered what they were capable of. The right time wasn't given to them. It was shaped by their decisions, their persistence, their willingness to start when others wouldn't. When we stop waiting for the perfect moment, we start realizing that the only moment we ever truly have control over is now. The right time doesn't exist somewhere in the future. It exists in the courage to begin where you are with what you have before you feel ready. We often glorify the idea of perfection, the flawless plan, the seamless execution, the moment when everything goes exactly as imagined. But perfection is a mirage. It looks attainable from a distance, yet the closer you get, the more it fades away. The pursuit of perfection can easily become the enemy of progress. It traps us in endless cycles of preparation, planning, and polishing, while the world quietly moves forward without us. Progress, on the other hand, is messy, imperfect, and beautifully human. It's the willingness to take the next step even when the outcome isn't guaranteed. Ideas alone don't change the world. Action does. The world is full of brilliant ideas that never saw the light of day because their creators were waiting for everything to be perfect. There's no shortage of imagination. There's a shortage of execution. The courage to act, even when things are uncertain, is what separates dreamers from doers. Action transforms thought into momentum, and momentum is what creates impact. Without it, even the best ideas remain silent. When we prioritize perfection, we create impossible standards that crush creativity. We measure our worth by outcomes instead of effort. We hesitate, edit, and overthink until the window of opportunity closes. But progress isn't about getting it right on the first try. It's about learning through motion. Every step, every mistake, every rough draft brings clarity. It's not about avoiding imperfection. It's about refining through experience. Think about how innovation really happens. The first version of anything, whether it's a business, a speech, or a piece of art, is rarely extraordinary. The first airplane didn't fly far. The first light bulb failed hundreds of times. The first draft of every story looks nothing like the one that gets published. What made these creations remarkable wasn't perfection, it was persistence. Progress came from iteration, from showing up again and again despite uncertainty. Perfection feels safe because it gives us an excuse not to start. I'm not ready yet, we tell ourselves. I'll begin when it's better. But readiness is built through action, not before it. The moment you take a step forward, even a small one, you gain something perfection can't give you: feedback, experience, and resilience. Each imperfect attempt shapes the path ahead more clearly than endless planning ever could. Progress demands vulnerability. It means exposing your work, your effort, your uncertainty to the world before it's polished. That's uncomfortable, but it's also the space where confidence grows. When you take imperfect action, you build trust, not in the outcome, but in your own ability to adapt, learn, and improve. Over time, that trust becomes stronger than fear. The most successful people aren't the ones who waited until they were certain. They're the ones who acted while others hesitated. They understood that the first step doesn't need to be perfect. It just needs to be taken. Every great achievement begins with movement. And movement, no matter how small, creates opportunities that waiting never will. Perfection is an illusion of control. Progress is an act of courage. When we shift our focus from flawless execution to consistent effort, we stop chasing the impossible and start building the achievable. Each imperfect step forward expands our capacity to grow, to create, and to make an impact that perfection could never deliver. Every great story begins quietly, not with fanfare, not with certainty, but with a small, often unnoticed beginning. The first word written on an empty page, the first prototype that barely works, the first yes whispered in the face of doubt. These are the sparks that ignite something greater. We often look at success in its final form, polished, powerful, undeniable, and forget that it once looked fragile. Every giant began as something small, awkward, and uncertain. There's something deeply powerful about small beginnings because they hold the potential for transformation. They don't look impressive at first. They rarely draw attention. But within them lies the seed of something extraordinary. The first step is rarely the hardest because of the effort it takes. It's hard because of the faith it demands. Starting means believing in something before anyone else does, before there's evidence, before there's applause. We're often taught to think big, dream big, plan big. But thinking big means nothing if it stops us from starting small. The world doesn't need more vision, it needs more first steps. The beauty of beginning small is that it allows room for mistakes, for learning, for evolution. Small starts give us permission to grow naturally, without the pressure of being perfect from the start. Every masterpiece began as a sketch. Every company began as an idea scribbled on a napkin. Every movement began with one person deciding to act. The small beginning is a test of conviction. It's easy to believe in something when it's already working, when others see its value. But starting small asks you to believe before the world does. It requires patience, persistence, and an unshakable sense of purpose. The world may not notice your early efforts, and that's okay. The point of a beginning isn't recognition, it's foundation. It's about building something real, something that can grow. Small beginnings are often underestimated because we live in a culture that celebrates outcomes, not origins. We glorify success stories without acknowledging the quiet, invisible labor that came before them. But what we call overnight success is usually years of small, deliberate steps stacked together. Progress doesn't happen in leaps, it happens in layers. Each small action compounds over time, forming something far greater than we could have planned at the start. There's also freedom in starting small. When you're at the beginning, no one expects you to be perfect. That's the time to experiment, to explore, to fail without fear. Small beginnings give you the space to figure out who you are and what matters most. They're not a limitation, they're a laboratory. Every mistake made early becomes wisdom later. Every adjustment strengthens the foundation. The first yes, whether it's saying yes to a project, a dream, or a new direction, carries enormous power. It's not just an agreement to act, it's a declaration of belief. That one small yes can shift the entire trajectory of your life. The first yes leads to the first step to the first lesson, and the first lesson to the first glimpse of progress. And soon, what once felt small starts to gain momentum. We often wait for the big break, the big opportunity, the big moment, but those moments are built from a series of small, quiet beginnings. Each start, no matter how insignificant it seems, is a building block for something meaningful. The challenge is not in starting grand, but in starting at all, trusting that the small steps you take today are shaping the extraordinary things you'll one day create. Fear has a way of showing up right at the edge of something important. It appears when you're about to speak up, to take a risk, to step into something uncertain. It disguises itself as caution, as logic, as timing. But beneath the surface, fear isn't just trying to stop you. It's trying to tell you something. The things that scare us most often point directly to the things that matter most. Fear in its purest form is a signal. It marks the boundaries of our comfort and the beginning of our growth. We're taught to see fear as a warning, a sign to step back, to protect ourselves. But in many cases, fear isn't danger, it's direction. It shows up not because something is wrong, but because something is meaningful. The presentation that makes your heart race, the decision that feels too big, the conversation you've been avoiding. Those moments often carry the potential to change your life. Fear isn't proof that you're unready, it's proof that you care. When we avoid what scares us, we stay safe, but we also stay small. Growth requires discomfort, and discomfort often wears the face of fear. Every time you move toward what scares you, you expand what's possible for you. The first time you speak in front of a crowd, it's terrifying. The next time, it's a little easier. Eventually, it becomes power. That's how courage is built, not by eliminating fear, but by learning to act in its presence. Fear is deeply personal. What terrifies one person might barely move another. That's why it's such a useful compass. It points you toward your own truth. The fear of failure might reveal your desire to succeed. The fear of rejection might reveal how much connection matters to you. The fear of being seen might reveal the depth of your authenticity. If you trace your fear back to its source, you'll often find your purpose waiting there. It's easy to mistake fear for a stop sign, but more often it's a mirror. It reflects the gap between who you are and who you're becoming. Every time you face what scares you, you step closer to alignment, closer to the life, the work, and the impact that truly resonate with you. Fear shows up when you're on the verge of something significant. That's why the moments that matter most often feel the most intimidating. We sometimes wait to feel brave before we act, but courage isn't the absence of fear. It's movement despite it. No one feels ready to take the leap. The difference between those who do and those who don't isn't confidence, it's trust. Trust in themselves, in their ability to adapt, in the belief that even if they fail, they'll learn something essential. Fear can paralyze you or propel you. The direction depends on whether you run from it or walk toward it. The people who make the greatest impact are often the ones who've made peace with fear. They've learned to read it, to understand it, to use it as guidance. When they feel afraid, they don't ask, how do I make this go away? They ask, what is this fear trying to show me? That shift turns fear from an obstacle into a compass, a tool for navigating toward meaning. Fear will always be part of the journey. It doesn't disappear with success, it simply evolves with you. The goal isn't to silence fear, but to listen to it without letting it drive. Because when you learn to see fear not as a wall, but as a doorway, it stops being the thing that holds you back and becomes the thing that leads you exactly where you need to go. We often believe that clarity comes first, that we need to understand every detail, map out every step, and have every answer before we begin. It feels safer that way, to wait until the fog lifts before taking a step forward. But the truth is, the fog doesn't clear until you move through it. Clarity isn't a prerequisite for action, it's the result of it. You can think, plan, and analyze endlessly, but real understanding only arrives when thought turns into motion. The mind loves certainty. It craves control, structure, and reassurance. But life doesn't work in straight lines. The path ahead only reveals itself as you walk it. You can spend weeks, months, even years trying to figure out what the right move is, yet it's often the simplest act of doing, sending the email, starting the project, making the call, that reveals what's next. Thinking prepares you, doing transforms you. Action has a way of simplifying what overthinking complicates. When you're stuck in your head, every decision feels heavier than it really is. You imagine every possible outcome, every potential failure, and you convince yourself that not moving protects you. But once you act, the noise quiets, the unknown becomes tangible. You gain feedback from the world, from others, from yourself, and suddenly what felt impossible becomes manageable. We often wait for confidence before we start, but confidence isn't what fuels action. Action is what fuels confidence. Each small step taken builds evidence that you're capable. Each experiment, even if it fails, teaches you something you couldn't have learned otherwise. The people who seem sure of their path aren't necessarily wiser. They've simply taken enough steps to see the road more clearly. There's a misconception that clarity comes from thinking harder. We try to reason our way into knowing. But clarity doesn't live in theory. It lives in experience. You don't learn to swim by reading about water. You learn by getting wet. You don't find your purpose by waiting for insight. You find it by engaging with life, by trying things, by making mistakes. Each moment of action reveals a little more of the truth you've been searching for. The discomfort of uncertainty is often the greatest barrier to action. We tell ourselves we're waiting for the right moment, the right conditions, the right plan, when in reality, we're avoiding the vulnerability that comes with starting. But movement doesn't require perfect conditions, it requires willingness. The willingness to step into the unknown with faith that clarity will follow. Every meaningful journey begins with a decision to move, even if you don't know where it will lead. The first step doesn't need to be right, it just needs to be real. Because once you're in motion, you can adjust, adapt, and refine. Motion creates feedback, and feedback creates direction. It's through doing that you discover what works, what doesn't, and what truly matters to you. You'll rarely have full clarity before you act, but that's what makes the process alive. The act of doing illuminates the path that thinking alone never could. When you begin to move, even in small ways, life begins to respond. Opportunities emerge, patterns appear, and the uncertainty that once felt paralyzing becomes the very space where discovery begins. We spend so much of our lives waiting to feel ready for the right skill, the right confidence, the right moment. Readiness becomes this invisible threshold we believe we have to cross before we begin. But that moment never truly arrives. No one wakes up one day with a perfect sense of certainty. The truth is, readiness isn't something you find, it's something you create. It's not built in stillness, but in motion. We tell ourselves stories to justify the waiting. I just need more experience. I need more time. I'll start when I'm better prepared. Those stories feel safe because they let us postpone risk. But readiness doesn't grow from waiting, it grows from engagement. You become ready by stepping into the very thing you don't yet feel prepared for. It's through the doing, the mistakes, the adjustments, the learning. that confidence begins to form. The myth of readiness keeps many dreams trapped in planning mode. It convinces us that preparation equals progress, when often it's a disguise for fear. There's a limit to what you can learn from the outside looking in. At some point, you have to cross the threshold, not because you're ready, but because you've decided that waiting won't teach you what doing will. Every expert, every leader, every creator you admire once stood where you are. Unsure, uncertain, and unready. The difference is, they started anyway. They didn't have all the answers, they simply trusted that they could find them along the way. That's how readiness works. It's not a switch you flip, it's a muscle you build. Each step forward strengthens it. Each challenge met expands it. Readiness is not about knowing everything, it's about being willing to learn. It's about accepting that mistakes are part of the process, not proof of inadequacy. When you wait to feel completely equipped, you rob yourself of the experiences that would actually equip you. It's only when you engage with the work, the uncertainty, the resistance, that you gain the clarity and resilience that readiness requires. The fear of not being ready is really the fear of being seen as unprepared. But perfection isn't what earns trust, authenticity does. People don't follow those who claim to have everything figured out. They follow those who are willing to show up as they are and still move forward. That vulnerability is what builds connection, and in that connection, readiness finds its foundation. We often imagine readiness as a feeling, but it's really a decision to begin before the fear disappears. The courage to take one small step forward, even when doubt is loud, is what opens the door to growth. Every time you choose to act instead of waiting, you teach yourself that you're capable of more than you thought. That realization is the beginning of real readiness. When you stop waiting to be ready and start embracing what readiness truly means, you realize that growth doesn't come after confidence. It creates it. Each action, no matter how uncertain, builds a little more strength, a little more belief, a little more momentum. And slowly, through doing, through trying, through showing up again and again, you become exactly as ready as you need to be. Momentum is one of the most powerful forces in life, yet it begins with something deceptively simple: the decision to start. The first step may feel small, almost insignificant, but it holds the potential to shift everything that follows. Once movement begins, something changes. The energy that was once stagnant starts to flow. Ideas connect. People respond. Opportunities that seemed distant begin to appear. Momentum doesn't come from waiting for motivation. It's born the moment you take action. There's a kind of magic that happens when you move, even without knowing exactly where it will lead. What once felt impossible begins to unfold. The fear that held you back starts to lose its grip, replaced by the rhythm of progress. Each small action feeds the next, and what felt heavy at first becomes lighter with motion. You realize that you don't have to conquer the entire mountain. You just have to keep climbing one step at a time. Momentum builds confidence in ways that planning never can. Every completed task, every attempt, every lesson learned reinforces your ability to continue. Confidence isn't something you find before you act, it's something you build through action itself. It grows stronger with movement. Each forward motion creates proof, not that you're perfect, but that you're capable. And once you believe you're capable, momentum takes on a life of its own. We often underestimate how quickly things can change once we start. A single email can lead to a conversation that leads to a partnership. A single post can connect you to a new audience. A single decision can open doors you didn't even know existed. Movement doesn't just create progress, it attracts alignment. The world tends to meet you at the level of your activity. When you move, life moves with you. Stillness often feels safe, but it's deceptive. Inaction creates the illusion of control, yet it slowly drains energy. Momentum, on the other hand, generates power. The more you move, the more fuel you create. The effort that once felt exhausting begins to energize you because you're no longer pushing against resistance. You're moving with flow. The hardest part is the beginning, when you're breaking inertia. But once motion begins, it carries you forward with a force that's hard to stop. Momentum doesn't mean rushing, it means staying in motion. It's about consistent progress, not frantic pace. Small, steady actions compound over time. The key is to keep moving, to resist the temptation to stop and overanalyze after every step. The moment you pause too long, doubt creeps back in. But if you keep a rhythm, even a slow one, you'll find that progress becomes natural, even effortless. The beauty of momentum is that it transforms effort into flow. What once felt like a struggle becomes part of your identity. You start to expect progress instead of question it. That shift in mindset changes everything. You begin to trust yourself more deeply. You start to see challenges not as barriers, but as opportunities to keep moving, to keep building, to keep growing. Momentum is self-reinforcing. The more you do, the more capable you feel. The more capable you feel, the more you do. And in that loop of action and belief, extraordinary things begin to happen. You realize that you never needed to have it all figured out. You just needed to begin. Because once you start, energy builds, and with it comes the confidence, the opportunity, and the strength to keep moving forward. Timing is often misunderstood as something that happens to us, as if the universe decides when the right moment arrives. We speak of luck, opportunity, and chance as if they are forces beyond our control. But those who create real impact understand something different. They know that timing isn't found, it's designed. The moment you choose to act becomes the right moment. It's not about waiting for external validation or perfect conditions. It's about taking ownership of your own pace, your own rhythm, your own time. Leaders and creators don't wait for permission. They move when others hesitate. They trust their intuition even when the path isn't clear. The greatest moments of progress are rarely the result of perfect timing. They're the product of decisive action. The courage to move before certainty is what shapes opportunities that didn't exist before. When you act, you don't just step into time, you shape it. You define what the right moment means for you. There's a quiet confidence that comes from realizing you can create momentum on your own terms. When you stop comparing your journey to others, you begin to notice how much power you have over your own timeline. The world often tries to impose its clock, telling you when you should succeed, when you should change, when you should arrive. But real growth rarely follows a schedule. It happens when you decide to stop waiting and start building. The myth of timing is that it's something to be discovered. In truth, it's something to be designed through decisions, discipline, and direction. Every act of initiative is a declaration that you refuse to be governed by circumstance. You stop asking, when will it happen? And start asking, how can I make it happen now? That question shifts your mindset from passive to purposeful. It transforms waiting into creating. When you design your own timing, you give yourself permission to move without guarantees. You accept that the beginning may not feel perfect and that progress might not be linear. But you also understand that the cost of waiting is far greater than the cost of imperfection. The act of starting gives meaning to time itself. Each moment becomes valuable not because it's ideal, but because it's yours. Every breakthrough in history began with someone refusing to wait for the right time. They launched, spoke, built, and acted before others thought it was smart. They didn't have all the answers, but they had clarity of intent. And intent, when paired with action, turns ordinary moments into defining ones. When you decide that now is your time, the world begins to adjust around that decision. Designing your timing also means embracing patience without passivity. It's about understanding that not every result comes instantly, but progress always starts immediately. You can't control when the harvest arrives, but you can decide when to plant the seed. Each step you take is a message to yourself, a signal that you're not waiting for opportunity, you're creating it. The right time is never something you stumble upon by accident. It's the moment you make a choice to begin, to act, to commit. The power lies not in waiting for alignment, but in creating alignment through movement. When you stop seeking the perfect moment and start designing it, time stops being something you chase and becomes something you command.